You know all those superhero movies we love, where someone with these incredible powers shows up and saves the day? Have you ever thought, this story feels kind of familiar? Well, today we're going to explore a pretty fascinating idea. What if the ancient accounts of Jesus and his miracles were like the original superhero story? Let's dive in. So yeah, this is the big question for today. And really, it's just a thought experiment. We're going to reframe this ancient narrative in a totally modern context. I mean, what happens when we look at these stories not just as religious texts, but as accounts of someone with truly extraordinary abilities? All right, so let's get into our first section, a superhero question. We're going to be framing an ancient story in a modern context. And look, let's be super clear about this from the get-go. This isn't about challenging anyone's faith, not at all. Instead, think of this as an exercise in perspective. We're just using the language of today, the language of superheroes that we all get from movies and comics, to see if it gives us a new way to understand a story that has shaped our world for centuries. And that is the absolute key right there. It's not about belief. It's all about the lens we're using. By just swapping the miracle framework for the superhero framework, we can explore the narrative itself and maybe get a better sense of what makes it so powerful and so enduring. But before we can even begin to draw any parallels, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room, and that's the problem of miracles. It gets to why these ancient claims face so much modern skepticism. In our world, a world run by science, how do we even begin to process these stories about supernatural events? So, what exactly is a miracle? Well, at its core, it's an event that just can't be explained by the normal rules of science and nature. It's something that feels like it has to come from a divine source because, we just can't figure it out any other way. And right there, that's where the tension with our modern mindset really starts to build. And this slide, it gets right to the heart of that conflict. You've got these two totally different worldviews. On one side, you have the ancient world, where the supernatural was just an accepted part of reality. No big deal. But on the other side, you have us, today, with our modern skepticism that demands hard proof and natural explanations for everything. So the question becomes, how do you bridge a gap that big? So for now, let's just set that whole debate aside and get to examining the evidence. We're just going to look at the stories themselves. If we treat these accounts like case files from a comic book, what are the specific powers being described? What are these abilities that have captured the human imagination for thousands of years? First up, we've got powers over the human body, and we're talking about some pretty intense stuff here. Accounts of instant healing, giving sight to the blind, and then, of course, the ultimate display of this power, bringing someone back from the dead, like in that famous story of Lazarus. Then you have the powers over nature itself. This is where we see control over the physical world. I mean, walking on water, stopping a raging storm in its tracks with just a command, and even changing the very substance of things, like turning water into wine. It's pretty incredible. Okay, now this is where it gets really, really interesting. Let's talk about the superhero framework. We're going to bring it all together and connect these ancient powers to the modern archetypes we all know so well from the big screen. Now, check this out. What's so wild is how neatly these parallels line up. Healing the sick or raising Lazarus. In a comic book, we'd call that biological regeneration or a healing factor, for sure. Walking on water or calming a storm, that's classic elemental or environmental control, like Storm from the X-Men. And the Transfiguration, where Jesus is said to have shone with a brilliant light, I mean, that sounds a lot like energy projection or adopting a luminous form, doesn't it? It's fascinating when you think about it. The core appeal of these stories seems to be totally timeless. This idea of someone with incredible powers using them to help humanity, well, that's the exact same narrative that fills our movie theaters today. The context is different, but that fundamental story is pretty much the same. So, after looking at all these parallels, what's the big takeaway here? What does this comparison ultimately tell us? This brings us right to the heart of an enduring debate. So, look, the crucial point isn't to slap a label on Jesus and call him a superhero. The much deeper, more interesting question is why? Why are we, as humans, so endlessly captivated by these stories of individuals with extraordinary power who use it for the greater good? Ultimately, I think it all comes down to this. The label, whether it's miracle or superpower, isn't really what matters. What truly matters is the meaning we find in these stories, the hope and the inspiration they've given people for centuries, and, continue to give us today. And that brings us to our final question, something for you to chew on. As our culture and our language keep changing, could it be that superhero is just our modern way of saying miracle? I'll let you think about that one. Thanks for watching.